now, we're talking finding new talent. And this is something that has always been really good at ASI when we've had the trade shows and people coming in and seeing what's going on in the industry. And Gemma Hatton, it's your job to pick your way through it. So Gemma, over to you. This is going to be a fascinating one. Off you go.
Thank you very much for that introduction. A really warm welcome to everyone joining us today. I've got a fantastic panel of education experts, and together we're going to be discussing some of the most important issues facing students today, and also giving a few hints and tips as to what's going to help you stand out when you're applying for your sort of dream motorsport job. So I think the first thing to do is just quickly introduce everyone. So I'll just quickly kick things off. So I've studied engineering. I did the Motorsport Masters at Cranfield University. I then worked as a Formula One tyre engineer for Pirelli and Manor, and was then deputy editor of Race Car Engineering magazine. I now set up my own technical writing company called Fluential. And I'm also course leader of the MIA School of Race Engineering. This is an extracurricular course that really bridges the gap between what you learn at university and working trackside with race engineers. And we have a 4-day course twice a year, and we run an online module every month. So do check us out on our website and social media. But I think I'll hand over to Willem now, who's going to introduce himself just for a minute or two.
Hello. So I'm an ex-head of aerodynamics of a number of different teams: Benetton, Ferrari, BAR, Honda, BMW, Sauber, and now retired from that Formula One work. I'm focusing much more on education. My introduction to Formula One was completely non-standard. I started with a degree in biochemistry and genetics, but love cars and motorsport and race motorbikes, love them too. Anything with anything that's fast, yeah. And just fell in love with also the science behind these technologies, and had to then do things like Open University study to gain more engineering, mathematics, all sorts of things like this. And now I'm really starting to focus much more on passing on the knowledge that a lifetime in Formula One has given me, and insights into how things really work. Yeah, that's my passion.
And you're very good at it too, Willem, which is why you're here. So that's great. And over to Clive, just to quickly introduce yourself.
Okay, thanks, Gemma. Hello, everybody. I'm Clive Temple. I'm the Programme Director for Motorsport and Automotive at Cranfield University. Cranfield is a postgraduate only institution, so we are looking at people at master's level and also individuals who wish to study PhD. And we do have a number of PhD students working in the area of motorsport. Gemma has announced that she studied motorsport at Cranfield, and we have a very strong alumni network which we draw upon because we use practitioners to help us deliver the program. And we also have extensive facilities at Cranfield. I started this particular journey. I've been at Cranfield for 25 years, and 20 years ago I launched the Motorsport MSc program, and I signed up Sir Jackie Stewart and a number of others to be our steering committee, and they've helped us design and develop the program, and we've continued to refine the program as we go forward, and also reflecting the changes that we are moving into. I mean, motorsport is fast moving, and it's very important that you update the curriculum as you go along. And I will say at this very moment, I think it's a great time for people who are innovative to get involved with motorsport and high performance engineering. There's so many challenges out there that represent opportunities for people such as yourself.
Excellent, thank you. And Gordana, over to you.
Thank you, Gemma. So I'm Gordana Collier. I'm the head of School of Computing, Engineering and Mathematics at Oxford Brookes University. that's me by day. By night, I tend to look after my Formula Student team. I have been working with Formula Student for 10 years now, and I'm still not sick of it, which is amazing. And to talk about the school itself, we have our flagship courses, which are motorsport, automotive with electric vehicles, and something a little bit more special, racing engine systems. So a whole raft of things related to motorsport. We do both undergrad and postgraduate courses. I've met people from almost every country on this planet on that program. It's just a pleasure to be part of such an exciting community. And similarly, our alumni are in every Formula One team, recently in Formula E, lots of electric developments. Our Formula Student car is not curriculum, it's extracurricular. It still has more than 200 members. And I encourage every single person that comes to Brookes to join the team, and then we have to deal with the size of that team. But it's an absolutely amazing environment to be in.
Yes, I'm sure there are many of our attendees who've done some experience in Formula Student. I remember it well. And finally, Genevieve, over to you.
Hi everybody, thank you for inviting me to speak on this panel. It's a privilege to be here with my colleagues. My name is Genevieve Gordon. I am the programme leader of a all new and innovative Motorsport Masters, but we differ from the engineering and technical side. The programme that I run and wrote is reflecting the business side of motorsport. So we have drawn on conversations that I've had in the past with various motorsport organisations, looking at how they could engage people with a more business focused interest into the motorsport environment. Personally, I've been involved in motorsport for years. I'm actually a lawyer by trade. And work with drivers and teams on various personal, commercial, legal matters. I have had my fair share of racing, from being the only girl in a family, obviously apart from my mother, who rode motorbikes. So I was, if I couldn't beat them, join them, or join them, beat them, which my brothers wouldn't thank me for saying. So I'm a big motocross fan, having had my first motorbike before I could walk. And I'm proud to say I'm the only one out of all of us that actually got my road license. So I'm the bad one of the family. I've also raced cars from 2CVs to Porsches. So yeah, I have a keen interest in the sport as both a participant and from an educational perspective.
So there we are. We've got a really fantastic panel. We'll be answering some questions towards the end of the session, so do fire them through. Obviously, everyone's motorsport in its very nature is very competitive, and as students apply for university courses or apply for jobs, you're up against many other very well qualified applicants as well. So I think from my point of view, what I would have liked to know those few years ago, and hopefully what the current students and people watching this would like to know, is probably what makes you stand out. So Willem, if we start with you, when you're looking at an application, what's the one thing you're looking for, and can you give a bit of a top tip as to the students, you know, what would make them really stand out on that CV?
So perhaps because I was an unusual applicant myself, I am happy to look for people with non-standard backgrounds. And in fact, I think the teams that we've created over time have done well sometimes because you have people, for example, if I'm looking for aerodynamics experts, aerodynamicists as such, I'm not going to only take people with a degree in my favorite university. I will look for, or experience in Formula One. I will look for aerospace experience or America's Cup yacht experience or something a little bit different. what I'm looking for in general, so that's a bit too specific, but what I'm looking for in general is for an application to show that the student has done a little bit extra to make themselves useful to a potential employer. So an example might be doing Formula Student. That for me is always a plus. But involvement, so for example, in Cranfield, I don't think they do Formula Student, but they do so many other things that are really useful. There are many different ways that you can make yourself stand out. And sometimes it can be as simple. So just imagine, so one of my jobs was head of aerodynamics at Ferrari. Imagine you put an ad out, head of aerodynamics at Ferrari, you put an ad out and you're looking for people who are going to be junior aerodynamicists. You get thousands of applications. So then the human resources people will filter out a lot anyway. And then my wife will usually help me because there's simply so many. And then I'll go through and I'm looking for anything that makes a student stand out. So good university qualifications, good grades are going to be a given, but sometimes it can be as simple as a really neatly laid out CV, a letter that's been specifically written for the job and the company concerned. And it might be as simple as someone's used yellow paper, it just stands out. It can be sometimes as silly as that. And then the teams in general will now be quite precise and ask a lot of questions. That's good if you to be consistent, ask the same questions. That's good, but then you risk having the same group of people. So I've specifically also looked for, so imagine I'm setting up I'm growing a team within Switzerland. When I arrived, we only had one Swiss aerodynamicist or very few Swiss people in a Swiss aerodynamics department. That struck me as just completely nuts. I just didn't understand that at all. Loads of English people. Okay, that's convenient. It's comfortable for an English person, but it's ridiculous. So I specifically looked for a mix of different backgrounds, but also I wanted some more, if you like, social magnets within the group. If you're in a foreign group, you need people who are going to bind the group together. So you need social magnets. So, yeah. I don't think that makes it any easier, but anyway.
It's a very interesting theme, though. From speaking to a lot of engineers, you know, you do need something to make you stand out, but it could be a very specific passion. We always use one of my friends as an example, who is just absolutely fascinated with trains, and he got a job because they just spent the whole interview talking about trains. So it's really just showing a passion for a particular subject. And Gordana, particularly when students are applying for undergraduate courses as well as your master's program, obviously they haven't had Formula Student, you know, they've only got a set of A levels, hopefully good grades, but at that younger level, what are the main things that you're looking for in applications?
I think British system of education is quite traditional, so majority of students will come with a certain set of grades, and we know what to expect and what is being told. But there are others from different backgrounds who might have done something in a college, and maybe they have a bike that they are keeping together, and people like that stand out straight away. Maybe we will give them an offer, obviously, because we think they can be successful, but they especially stand out very quickly when we start grouping them and inviting them. For example, I'm sorry, I'm going to mention from your student team again, because that's a magnet for my students. They come in and say, I want to be there. I want to be that guy who is presenting. And it's very obvious. Students who have done something extra, they already know where they want to be. They know what they want to do. Obviously, not everybody's like that. I actually, for a long time, didn't know what I wanted to do. And I can relate to that as well. But it's really helpful, as Willem says, to have that amazing mix of different people. There are some people who are really very good at their numbers or writing code, and getting them to do something extra will really make them stand out, and we need to work with them. The other ones is the other way around. Obviously, they already have their hands dirty. They're already in the workshop trying to drive the car 5 minutes after they arrived, but we need to pull them back and get them into school. And believe it or not, there are actually weeks in May, early May, when we have classes run by older students for younger students to make them study and do well in exams. So there is so much going on. It's a fantastic way to make them aspire, because some of them think, oh, I'll just get in, I'll make a car, and then I'll get into Formula One. So that balance between study and having fun really needs to be managed from day one.
Yeah, definitely. And Clive, I remember my interview with you like it was just yesterday, mainly because I was absolutely petrified. So, could you give a couple of hints and tips again for the kind of things you're looking out for?
Well, firstly, I'll say that I am a kindly soul. I'm not the Witchfinder General. What I will say is that I agree with everything that's been said so far. I think it's very, very important that when you apply for any education program, you sell yourself. Okay, you've got to sell yourself. That's very, very important. So that means taking the time and effort to put together the best application you can. Now, my expectation is very much the candidate's direct involvement in engineering projects related to cars and or motorcycles, and preferably in the context of motorsport. But it doesn't matter if you've done something where, for example, you might have helped restore your parents' MG or old Triumph car, those sorts of things. They actually give people a sense that you've got the ability to apply hands-on as well as your academic attainment. And what I would like to say is, if you can demonstrate that what you're doing is extracurricular and not merely participation in the activities laid on by your university, because bearing in mind, I'm looking at people coming on at master's level or PhD, that's very important. We want to see people going the extra mile. Very, very, very critical, I think, because that will give people an assurance that you're the type of person that they can see fitting into their organisation. Because in motorsport, you do have to go the extra mile. What I will also add is that if you do come into the world of motorsport, you need to, I believe, and I think my colleagues on this panel will echo this, you do need to have the passion, but you also need to have the realism, and your academic attainment needs to be underpinned by a solid understanding of maths and physics. That's very, very important in my opinion.
And Genevieve, we've talked a lot, this is primarily aimed at technical courses. Obviously, your course is quite unique. It's the first of its kind. From a more business perspective, what are you looking for from students?
Okay, so when you fill out your application form on the National Motorsport Academy website, there's a standard process that you follow. And I think not dissimilar to other business environments, what will make you stand out is actually what you write in your cover letter, and give some background to your experience. And of course, because it's a business of motorsport degree master's program, you can draw on your experience through school, through an undergrad degree, or obviously through your previous work experience, and apply that in a business setting. I would also stress that dependent on which program you want to join, because the NMA offer a PG Cert, PG Dip or a full MA, tailor your ambition and what you write in your CV to the course that you actually want to complete. That for me is critical. So to show that you've got support in where you're headed. I would also like to note that your work experience or your previous experience or interest does not have to be motorsport relevant. The reason you might come onto this course is because you want to get into motorsport. So we don't sit there and say irrelevant, nothing motorsport related. We actually look at exactly the opposite and think, okay, this person is a super candidate. What can they offer to the sustainability of motorsport in a business sense going forward? Because for us, all of us, I would say, as custodians of education in this environment, we're partly responsible to make sure that motorsport sustains and has a future, because we are educating the people that are going to take it forward. So for me, to answer your question, it's difference, standing out, experience, and showing that you present an opportunity to the sport itself.
Yeah, I think you've summarised some really good points there, so thank you for that. The next topic actually relates to one of our questions. Obviously, with Brexit, particularly in the UK, motorsport is an international and global sport. But, what are the sort of opportunities for international students who want to study and work in motorsport within the UK? And how has that changed after Brexit? And I wonder if, Gordana, you could share some of your thoughts and expertise in this area.
It's actually very interesting. We've been looking at this, obviously, like everybody else. In terms of study, obviously, it has become more expensive, and I'm sure Clive will confirm this as well, because EU is now part of the rest of the world, is Britain and then the rest of the world. So unfortunately, the fees are significantly higher. Let's not beat about the bush. But there is a discount for EU students, actually. So it is slightly more advantageous still for EU students to study in the UK. So I'm just stating facts. I don't want to get into too much detail about this. Obviously, go to the website and look at exact details. But at least at Brookes, European students have always, especially at master level, been a very, very big contingent, and we are hoping that that will continue. We're actually seeing quite good applications. We thought it would be worse, especially first year, but it's actually going quite well. I think people outside understand that British academia and certain universities will help them to achieve their goal very well. Obviously, nobody can promise anything, but it's a good still place to study in the UK, being more expensive still. And in terms of, you were asking about jobs, we study the system, the new system. It's still very, very fresh. But if you look at the criteria, there are a few hoops to jump through. But any graduates who is aspiring, I think, to Formula One is going to be meeting those targets. Targets are not that difficult to meet. So I think the point system will work. Obviously, it's a little bit more to do, but I think it becomes an interesting field, because Willem said, it's great to have people from all over the world. And now that's become the case. So it is exactly the same for anybody outside of UK. They are all in the same position, and the position is better than you may think. This is my initial analysis.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And Clive, I wondered if you've got anything to add, particularly with if you know anything about the visas situation when people graduate, and are the jobs still out there? Are companies still offering those visas? It's a question I get asked a lot.
Yeah, okay. I'm not an expert on the employment situation in terms of the legality, but what I do know is that my perspective, and I think the panel will share this, is that if there's one benefit from Brexit, and I am not a Brexiteer by any stretch of the imagination, it is this, that it now doesn't matter where you come from, okay? That is very, very important, because in the past, motorsport, despite it being a global industry, particularly where F1's concerned, it has been in the past difficult for people starting out where their careers are concerned to actually secure employment within the EU. Because if the company couldn't find a person within the EU. They could then go outside of the EU, but of course at entry level they'll be able to find somebody in the EU. The points system based on skills, based on ability and not domicile, has to be a very good thing. This is an international activity. You know, it is truly global, and we want to represent that. I know that at universities like Oxford, Brookes, at Cranfield, we do have very international communities. We have students coming from all over the world, and critically, we still have a bedrock of UK students and EU students. And I'm actually involved with interviewing at this, this week, for example. And I've got a good spread of people coming from the EU and from other countries around the world, as well as the UK. What I will add here, though, is I think that we come back round to the point that Willem has given you an inference to, and that is that at different levels, you can come into this sector with, say, an unusual sort of background of experience. You've got to remember that Formula One teams, Formula E teams, WEC, etc., when it comes to more senior roles, they might be looking at somebody who's actually come from another sector. So I've actually had people in the past come to Cranfield who've worked in aerospace. So they've worked for BAE Systems, for example. Then they've come and done the masters, and then they've gone out. And I've got one case, which is alumnus of the university, Matthew Sorrell from Red Bull Technology, principal aerodynamicist at Red Bull. He did exactly that. You know, he had the background in aerospace as an employee of BAE Systems. He then came to us, and he then went on and he has progressed. And we see this, you know, you'll get people who will come in who don't necessarily come in from school straight to undergraduate to postgraduate. So again, opportunities there. And the other point I'd like to make is, and I'm involved with a lot of the initiatives in this respect, is inclusion, diversity, equality. That's what we're about. You know, I think that, you know, if you look at the panel, in fact, this time there's only 2 males on it, which is a good thing. So, yeah, let's make it happen on that count as well.
I think that's a really interesting point, Clive, you mentioned about that area of expertise. And I think particularly as hybrid technology, electric racing, within Formula One, the simulation departments, the coding departments, the computer science departments are becoming bigger and bigger in control systems. So being able to have an expertise in that area and then going off into a career there, I think is very interesting. We're just going to move on to some questions now. And just as I've said that, I've got to scroll, bear with me. So I think this is an interesting question, again, particularly relevant at the moment. And Willem, I'm going to fire this one your way, if you don't mind. So a question from Thomas on Swapcard. I heard from a B2CC race engineer that simulator racing, such as iRacing or R-Factor experience, is good on a CV because of the competitive edge, and you can also start practicing data analysis skills, particularly at the moment where we would normally say, go out and get experience and speak to teams and work with teams and get trackside experience. Willem, do you think that this kind of simulator racing is a good option to try and hone some of those skills?
So normally in the past, I would have said to potential employees, if they're looking for, let's say, an engineering role, is that if you are a kart racer and you have a secret dream to be a Formula One driver, then that's probably not a good thing to say when you're going for an interview. But if your objective is you're sim racing because it's great fun and you're using it to analyze data, and you perhaps bring to your interview, you're showing that you are analyzing data from you and competitors and comparing and trying to understand it, then yeah, that's just another thing that's positive. You're using your brain. Yep. So I'd say would normally maybe not be so positive, but with the perspective of using it for analysing data, yes, absolutely.
And we've got a question from, I'm awful at pronouncing names, Michaela, I think. What next, alongside Formula Student, in terms of extracurricular activities that aren't necessarily an internship, can business students do next for their studies that are helpful for a job later on? Genevieve, if you're there, would you like to answer that one? Some other business-related extracurricular activities?
Sure. I think any form of engagement with another sports organisation would be really helpful, and not only for a postgraduate mode of study, but also for gaining a job later on. So it might be that you want to volunteer at a sports event, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a motorsport event. It could be that you've run a sports club for young people, which might include elements of safeguarding, volunteering, financial planning, all various areas that are obviously very relevant to motorsport in the long run. Aside from sports relevant experience, also the transferable skills that you gain from other environments. So perhaps a musical instrument, perhaps some other form of engagement. You might have had some great experiences as a volunteer yourself, or perhaps working as an assistant in a shop, because then you're learning customer services and so on and so forth. So my answer would be, don't rule anything out. What you have to do is think, okay, how does this benefit me? And what skill from that environment can I take into potentially a motorsport business centric role?
And that brings us back to Clive's point earlier about being able to sell yourself. You know, any role is relevant to motorsport if you sell it correctly, I think. So yes, and another question, and Willem, I'm going to fire this to you again. So a question from Charles: given the highly technical nature of the industry, would you suggest that students diversify their learning, so they're learning as much as possible, or try and specialise early? And I think this is particularly a bit of a conundrum within Formula One, because it's very easy to go in and become the famous expression pigeonholed. What would you recommend?
That's a genuinely difficult question to answer, because to give yourself the best chance of making a start in a particular team for a particular role, early specialization gives you an edge. If you want to be a technical director in the longer term future, you actually need a broad background. So you need to have experience in different sectors. And unfortunately, within the sport, there are very few people willing, and perhaps able, but certainly very few people willing to try to create the next person who's going to threaten them for their job. Yeah. So that's quite a challenge, and I would say either way can work. Having a broad education gives you more options to go for. Having a specific one makes you more likely to get that very first job. Now, I got my first job in Formula One as a model maker. I had a university degree. I had experience of motorsport, race engineering, all sorts of things, but I wanted to get my toe in, and I didn't worry about what the job was. So I got a job as a model maker. First, got toe in the door. And it doesn't matter where you start. Yeah. So, and I made it clear, I will do this job 100% for at least a couple of years, whilst seeing if there are other jobs in the company, but I'll stick to that job for a couple of years, which I did. And then after a few years, I will be looking outside, because I can do more than make models. But in fact, I couldn't make models when I joined. I wasn't a trained pattern maker. I didn't have those physical skills, but I learned some of them. Yeah, I learned them.
And there's a lot of, particularly in Formula One, there's some great graduate schemes where you shift for, I think, 1 or 2 years into different departments. I did a placement at Nissan, and that really helped me, that kind of structure. Willem, what would how easy is it once you're in a department within a Formula One team to move across to the next one?
Actually, it's not that difficult. the trick is to try and get your boss on side, and it sometimes works and it sometimes doesn't. So I'm one who loves to grow people and see what they're capable of doing. And it's cost me a few times that you have people who are threatening your job, but if you've got people who are that good, they're threatening your job, then the team's going to do well, because if you're good enough to have earned that position and you deserve it, then the team's going to go well when you've got a broader base. And so I would say usually it's okay. I had a few people, particularly actually in Switzerland here, who were really very, very hard and got very upset with people when they left the department and fell out with them and things like that. And I had to go in and try and smooth waters. But usually once you're in, the trick is to make sure you don't give the impression when you're going for the interview for a, say, junior design position, that you're immediately going to be looking to be an aerodynamicist. You make sure that it's clear you're going to do that position for a good amount of time before you start looking, so that you give your employer, your potential employer, the best chance to take you on. Yeah, and it's a bit like it is selling yourself. And one of the things I'd love to just quickly mention. In life, you learn there are lots of different personality types. I am, or was when I was younger, very capable of selling myself, very aggressive. I knew everything, even though, I didn't, of course. One of the things I've learned as an employer is to listen and to ask, and it took me a while. And so you're more likely then to capture the capabilities of someone who is far shyer and far less, if you like, overtly, aggressively selling themselves. So also as an employer, I recommend people to really think, ask people questions and give them time to answer. So an example might be a stereotypical Japanese person will be very quiet and shy. If you don't listen, you potentially miss a great opportunity. And in Italy, it's actually a little bit similar, that people try really hard to be polite. So that's and that's something as a student applying, you have to think, okay, I am very shy and quiet. I need to really think about selling myself, where someone like me, it just came naturally. Yeah. And so as an example, I would use my wife, who is incredibly capable, highly intelligent, and so self-critical. I just don't believe it sometimes, that she just me, I'm just going for gold. I'm not interested in coming second. I only want to win. Yeah. And so those personality types you also, as an employer as well, you need to consider. But if you are really shy, then maybe you need to practice a little bit and think about the things you have to say to try and convince an employer that you have something good to offer.
And I think, as someone who's applied to many jobs and got a few, but not all of them, it's very difficult to take rejection from, as you're trying not to take it personally, when actually it may be that you're just not the right nature or have the right skill set to fit within that team. So I think our sort of final message to close this session really is, don't give up. It really only takes one yes. I have got folders and folders of hundreds of cover letters and CVs that I've written to pretty much any team you can think of, all the emails as well. Keep applying, keep trying, really build your network. You're doing great by coming to events like this and hearing from our wonderful experts. So just keep doing everything you can, particularly with platforms like LinkedIn. Keep building up your network, building up your skill set, and keep determined. And I'm sure that we will be seeing you at a racetrack sometime soon. And on that note, I'd like to thank you so much for our wonderful panelists today. It's been really fantastic to hear your insights, and you've each offered a really good, unique insight as well. And good luck. And that's it from our session. We hope you found it useful. Thank you so much for joining us, and continue to keep engaged with us personally on LinkedIn, but also the Autosport International and ASI Connect as well. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Steph. Gemma, before you disappear,
bye.
Very quick question. As everyone says goodbye, it's always an awkward moment, isn't it, on these video calls? Even though we've had it for about a year, we still haven't got to grips with the weird goodbye, have we? But Gemma, before you disappear off, as somebody who's, as you say, you've applied for many jobs, you train people as well. Do you think that as much of the onus of finding talent, it's all about the people trying to get jobs, obviously, and prove that they have got something to offer a company or a business or something like that? But how much are you finding it that the businesses really need to change their thinking and go, okay, we've got to really adapt, because the ways we've hunted down talent in the past and the talent we've hunted down in the past is actually null and void now as we move towards 2030 and being net carbon neutral, etc.?
I think there's definitely been a change. Since I graduated maybe 6 years ago, it was very much tick the boxes of get a degree, get Formula student experience, have you worked trackside. It was normally that was enough. And then it was a question of how your interview went and how you sold yourself. But I think now, everyone's popping out with really good degrees and good grades. Everyone's done a thesis or a dissertation that's quite relevant. And most people have done Formula student or they've got enough extra stuff on there. So I do really feel for this current generation of students, they've got to find another layer of something that really makes them stand out. And that's why actually having a unique passion for something, even if it's not that related to race cars, it makes you stand out and it makes you go, oh, actually, this is quite interesting if they've got a very specific passion for that, So I think because of that, because everyone's coming out and it's so competitive, that businesses are having to change anyway, because they've got really good high level stack of CVs. Well, they've got to change their ways of sifting through that pile to get someone who fits within their team.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how it moves on. I mean, the year that we've had, this last 12, 14 months, has really changed a lot of the ways of thinking. Even office work, people working 2 days in the future, 2 days in the office maximum and the rest from home. So it's going to be really interesting. It's a really good chat. Thank you very much to yourself for hosting that panel and all your guests as well.
Good
there
fun.
we go.
Thank you.
Cheers there to Gemma. A real kind of insight, isn't it, into how you get these jobs, and really the industry and the advice coming forward is just keep going. You've got to keep cracking on and proving not just your worth, but what you can bring as well. Because, as we move forward, no one really knows where the industry is going to fully end up as we move on down the road. And that's what these events are all about.